Thank you for joining. Can everyone, if there's a problem with the audio, please use your chat function to let us know that if you're not hearing us. I wanted to welcome you all to this second inaugural webinar for the Green City Bonds Coalition in the United States. My name is Doug Sims. I'm Director of Strategy and Finance at NRDC's Center for Market Innovation. We're the part of NRDC, which works on transforming markets for food, water, shelter, energy, and infrastructure more broadly. And we're very proud to be a part of a coalition that includes the NRDC you see beneath you on the screen, Climate Bonds Initiative, the CDP, the C40 series, and As You Sow. We're also a growing coalition and looking for folks who want to help this market stand up in the U.S. So there'll be information about how you can do that later in the presentation. So the good news is we have two great speakers today for you, which you'll learn about in a little bit. The bad news is I have a cold, so you probably can't hear me that well. So I'm going to talk as little as possible. I'm going to go through a few slides to discuss the market opportunity and what's happening in green bonds, green muni bonds in the U.S. and green bonds more generally. And then we're going to go to our panelists. The first panelist will be Brian McCartan from Sound Transit in Seattle. And then we're going to go to Mike Brown from the SFPUC talking about their green bond issuances. Then we'll open it up for questions from the group. Thank you for joining. Okay, so what is the state of the U.S. muni market? It's a $3.7 trillion market held by investors. Most of the investors are individuals, and they hold the bonds either directly or indirectly, directly as individuals or indirectly through different asset managers. It's a market driven by tax exempt, so only a small portion of the 3.7 trillion are taxable. Which the tax-free aspect of it is a benefit, but also limits certain large investors from participating. There are some federal programs we'll hear a little bit about during one of the presentations that are available to attract tax-exempt investors. And what are green muni bonds? Green muni bonds take this trusted market, really the workhorse of American infrastructure for almost 100 years, and adds additional benefits for the same price. If you're an investor, you can get all of the security of a rated muni bond that you get from a normal investment, but also get some attributes, climate attributes or attributes of resilience as well. There's also benefits to the issuers, diversify your investment pool, and we're seeing some benefits in yield. And of course, the underlying reason for infrastructure is to make lives better for people in cities and metropolitan regions and also rural regions. When we say cities, we just mean locus of activity, which provide infrastructure. So Bloomberg gives us some great data on green bonds. Here's a chart from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. It shows the progression of the market since 2007, the global market. If you look on the last couple years, we've seen a really large uptick, almost 40 billion last year, and we're on track to exceed that this year. There's different kinds of bonds, but you can see that the U.S. muni market is a significant part of the global green bonds story. It's right here. It's the only country broken out, and you can see it's a large part of the total. Sort of zooming in more on that previous point that U.S. munis are a big part of the green bond story right now globally. This chart shows half-year increments, and so you can see in the end of the year 2014, U.S. green munis really rocketed, and they followed a similar trajectory in the first half of this year. We talk about what is a labeled and an unlabeled green bond. This chart in Bloomberg generally tracks what's called labeled green bonds, bonds that are labeled as such. Other bonds by investors may be deemed green bonds because they, in fact, represent what the investors deem to be green assets, but aren't labeled as such. The other two categories are some of those government programs I mentioned, QECBs and CREBs. So where are muni issuers? They're everywhere. This chart shows, also from Bloomberg, really shows who has done labeled muni bonds from inception till now. And you can see there's a big concentration of investors on the West Coast, in Washington, in California. There's some big issuances in the middle of the country, you can see as well. There's also significant activity in the Northeast. But also places as far south as Georgia, Florida, are also accessing this market, and we're trying to increase the folks who see this as a viable and attractive opportunity. There's all kinds of green muni bonds out there. There's geo bonds, there's revenue bonds, there's project bonds. There's been no project bonds so far in the U.S. market. There's also securitized bonds, and this chart is from our Green Muni Bonds Guide, which goes into some detail about some of these issuances, and we'll talk about how you get access to that guide later. How do you issue a Green Muni Bond? This is a simplified example of how issuers come to market. You take your typical capital investment or improvement program, and you run it through a screen that identifies and prioritizes green criteria. And you would seek to find green criteria that are applicable to your asset class. So if it's water, transport, waste, energy, you would look to third-party standards to see what the market perceives as green. And you would collect those assets and put them into a green bond program, and that program would have disclosure in the offering document and ongoing reporting over the life of the bond. So what is the coalition's mission? We can talk about this more at the end, but the coalition's mission is to increase the issuances of green muni bonds in the U.S., the bonds which have these characteristics, and the characteristics are substantiated by actual market tests, investor-driven tests that show that these bonds are indeed green. So we can talk a little bit more about the details at the end of the discussion if we have time. So how can you be a part of the coalition or find out more about the coalition? We have this guide, which is available at this website, and I encourage you to download it, peruse it, and get in touch with us about getting involved. So our speakers, I want to present them briefly as we turn into the meat of the presentation. Brian McCartan is Executive Director, for Finance and Information Technology at Sound Transit, the regional transit agency in Seattle, Washington. Prior to joining Sound Transit, he served as debt manager for the city of Seattle and as international economist at the U.S. Treasury. Mr. McCartan holds a Master's of Arts degree from Yale and a Bachelor of Arts from University of Washington. Then we have Mike Brown. Mike Brown is Capital Finance Analyst for the SFPUC, position he's held since 2006. His group has responsibility for the debt issuance and administration for multi-billion-dollar capital programs across the SFPUC's water, power, and wastewater enterprises, including a $34 million green bond that the SFPUC issued in May 2015 for the power enterprise. Excuse me. Mike has a master's in city planning from MIT. So now we're going to hear from Brian, and happily I'll be able to stop talking and sound like a squawking bird. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Doug. Again, this is Brian McCartan. I'm CFO at Sound Transit, and this is essentially investments or light rail routes are really capacity from a very, almost immediately. In 2008, the voters approved a second program for us, and we call that ST2, Sound Transit 2. And that program has an additional 36 miles of light rail construction including 19 light rail stations, a number of transit center improvements, regional bus service, and additional commuter rail service. So kind of a second phase, very substantial phase to the existing program we have in place. It's one of the most ambitious transit expansions in the country. It's about a $15 billion capital plan. Next slide, please. So of that capital plan, we have about a $6 billion bonding program in order to finance the capital improvements. And as we look to issue our first green bond, a really important foundation for us was that the agency has had a really excellent sustainability program and commitment to sustainability for a number of years. And we have a sustainability program run by Amy Shatskin, who's our sustainability manager out of our planning function. And she has developed a really strong program cutting across all the disciplines in the agency. Organized our sustainability program around three P's: people, planet, and prosperity. And we have a very robust internal governance model that establishes sustainability goals for operations, for construction, for agency administration. And the agency has taken a pretty comprehensive view of sustainability. It's not just about the sort of narrow elements, but really covers all of quality of life, environmental issues, lowering long-term costs, making our program sustainable, building a just job base within the Seattle community. The heart of our sustainability contribution really though lies in the build out of the mass transit system in the Seattle area, basically getting people off cars, single occupancy vehicles, and onto greener, lower emitting public transportation, particularly light rail. And estimates are that our programs will be saving a substantial amount of greenhouse gas annually by making that move from car to mass transit. The agency sustainability program has been ISO certified for a number of years, and we've received two transit agencies in the country who have received the Public Transportation Association's platinum level for its sustainability program. So I'm rolling on this a little bit because, again, it's really served as the platform for our green bonds. Our green bonds were not a one-off initiative within the finance function. We're really part of this much broader approach on sustainability. And that also made the issuance of green bonds much easier because we have a documented, established sustainability approach that then, as we work with our second opinion, really flowed pretty quickly because the agency had such a robust structure in place. Next slide, please. So as we market for our 2015 financing, we had a structure, about $1 billion green bond. This was divided in two series, essentially. One was $150 million of variable rate bonds. This was a SFPUC-based reset that was in two tranches. These were 30 to 35-year term bonds, but again, taking advantage of low rates on the front end of the yield curve and resetting. Majority of the bonds, however, were traditional tax-exempt fixed-rate debt. The pledge for all of these taxes was our local sales tax, which is imposed at 9 cents throughout our Tri-County region, and a small amount of rental car tax as well, but 99% of the dollars are sales tax. Sound Transit has enjoyed some of the strongest ratings of any transit agency in the country. We have bonds rated AAA by Standard & Poor's and AA2 by Moody's. Very strong coverage on bonds, very strong bond documents, sort of 1.5 to 2 times coverage on bonds. So very strong covenant and pledge structure for bondholders point of view. Next slide. So then focusing a little bit on our green bond issuance, as we entered the spring of 2015 and knew we were going to market, I was very interested in potentially pursuing our first green bond, and really had three objectives. First was to see if we could widen our investor base. We have a very substantial bonding program still to go, about $4 billion or more. And so obviously at that level, we're very interested in giving the broadest market we can, and attracting turning over every rock for new investors. Our second goal was really to advertise and get some recognition for the great sustainability work that the agency is doing. Again, it's very fundamental to our values here, orientation, and to the program. And so we're really saw it as a benefit to be able to further promote the work that the agency's capital program has in terms of promoting sustainability within the region. And the third was maybe a little less selfish in that I think this is a really important financing tool for green projects, sustainable projects going forward, and saw it as an opportunity to issue a large bond that was kind of using best of practice green bond approaches to help deepen the market. And we were hoping by going to market with such a large green bond, that again we could kind of help deepen and strengthen the market more generally. So from front to back, then the issuance was about a 6-month process. I have said, really think we added any time at all making this a green bond issuance. We have a diversified banking team in place, a bond counsel in place. Debt financing is kind of part of our normal business here. So adding the additional due diligence and work that I'll talk about in a second for making the issue green really was, I did not add anything to the schedule. We were committed at the beginning to try to, again, in order to reach that third goal, to really try to have best practices for green issuances. And so we made sure we were fully compliant with really the only objective standards out there on the International Capital Markets Association for green bond principles, the 2015 version. And we're issuing the bonds under the green transportation element of the green bond principles. And we really tried to fully disclose. We looked at pretty much a lot of other green bond OS issuances, and tried to put as much information in the OS as we could about the agency's sustainability program and the green bond element of the sale. Thirdly, we did seek and receive a second party review and validation of the green bonds. We did an RP and got three bids, and selected Sustainalytics to do second opinion review. And this was probably the greatest amount of additional work related to the bond sale. We had probably 6+ weeks of pretty much daily back and forth with Sustainalytics, going through in detail our proposed expenditure of funds, which cut across multiple, probably 30+ capital projects, reviewing in detail the amount that we're allocating to each of those projects, and whether those projects, in fact, were classified as green sustainable transportation investments. And we dropped some projects, added some others, and really had a very collegial approach with them to finalize our list of eligible projects. And working with Sustainalytics, put into their report about a 6-page, very detailed listing of each project that was funded with the green bond elements, so that investors really had a lot of confidence that they knew with a good deal of precision where the bonds were going to be spent. We had the good fortune of a lot of these expenditures were already been made, and so we had essentially, instantaneous expenditure of the bonds. So I know there's some concern amongst issuers about ongoing disclosure related to green bonds. In our case, it's going to be minimal in that we've essentially reimbursed ourselves for those expenditures. So those dollars have already been spent. And so we'll have a fairly limited tail of ongoing disclosure related to compliance with the green bond principles. Then finally, we did a fairly extensive outreach with investors. As part of any large bond sale, we would do normal roadshows, webinars, individual calls with investors. And on top of that, we really made an effort to reach out to interested green bond investors. I have to compliment our lead bank, JP Morgan, has a dedicated green bond salesperson who's very knowledgeable and knows, pretty much to a person all the players within this market in New York, and was able to work with me to reach out to a lot of individual investors and test their interest in the green bond sale and make sure they were aware that it was in the market and who Sound Transit was, what our program was about. So I think that's an important element of expanding the sale. Next slide, please. So we went to market in mid-July, had a very successful result. Our variable rate bonds were placed at about 0.72%. We did not have any green buyers there. It was a fairly limited market. Of the 150 million people were buying, $50 million blocks, and so we had some fairly well-known large, institutional investors picking up those bonds. The fixed rate issue was where we saw our green investors, and we ended up pricing that at about 3.88% TIC, and we did attract 10 to 12 dedicated green investors and a large number of other, quasi-green investors, as it were, to purchase the bonds. So we think we definitely met our first objective of widening our investor base. Then we also really received a tremendous amount of press on this, both at the local, national, international level. So we think we met our second objective of promoting the agency's sustainability work, and we're very pleased. I think that was obviously helped by this being the largest municipal green bond in history. So obviously that was more stable with press as a story than it would have been otherwise. So we really think, looking back, we were able to meet all our three objectives on the sale. We think on our last objective, which I skipped there, was I've gotten a number of calls from other issuers looking to do this, and I think then got some good feedback from some of the professionals who work in this field that they were pleased we did the second opinion and the full disclosure on the issuance, and that will kind of help give investors more confidence about the product coming to market. Going forward, we're still evaluating, but we think that this will be an element of our capital funding going forward, and really interested in some continued dialogue with some of the dedicated green investors to understand better, what kind of debt issue of Sound Transit's high quality sales tax back debt is of interest to them, and maybe how we can tailor a little more of our debt issuance to that green market. So that's an overview, and I'm happy to turn it back over to Doug. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Brian. Excuse me. We're going to have some questions at the end of the session, so I'm going to turn it right over to Mike to talk about the SFPUC issues. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Doug, and NRDC, and thanks, Brian. That was a great presentation.
Hello, Mike.
Yeah, next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, cut off. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I'll just provide a brief overview of the SFPUC and then launch into our green bond sale. We're a department of the City and County of San Francisco. We provide water to everyone in San Francisco. About 2/3 of the water is also delivered to residents in the South Bay and on the peninsula. We provide wastewater services for in-city customers and also power. And power is generated from our hydroelectric facilities east of here in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains, and that power is delivered to municipal functions in the city. It provides about 1/5 of the overall city's needs. And I'll just add now that we have a long history of issuing bonds and other forms of debt for water and wastewater, but not so much for power. So the green bond was the Power Enterprise's first bond issuance as well. Next slide, please. So to address the question why we issued green bonds, well, the city has a very aggressive climate action plan. We're about to roll out a 100% renewable public power program, so it aligns well with the city's green mission and principles. Furthermore, the power system, because it's a hydroelectric facility, it is all greenhouse gas free, so it aligns very well there as well. Furthermore, it's an old system. We have a lot of aging infrastructure. We have a large capital program for the next 10 years to rehabilitate the country hydro system. So we thought we could leverage the green bonds for those needs as well. Furthermore, green bonds we hoped would broaden the investor community for the SFPUC. People are used to seeing our water and wastewater bonds, but not power. So we thought with the addition of adding green bonds, we may attract some new investors. I'll address that at the end. And finally, what we agreed to do in the statement is to track the project progress and spending each year on the green bonds. So this is all new money bonds. We haven't pre-funded them or anything like that as Seattle did. So this is all for new spending. Next slide, please. Just talk a little bit about the bond sale itself. As I said here, we issued the bonds in May. It was our first ever power bond sale. We have approximately $5 billion in outstanding revenue bonds for water and wastewater, but nothing to date, no publicly offered debt to date for power. So we issued the bonds on May 7th. It was we considered quite successful, under 4% interest costs. And we ended up breaking these into two series. One is a completely green, and that's to rehabilitate the hydroelectric infrastructure, and then a non-green series, which is for the power line portion of the work. And the power lines currently do transmit greenhouse gas-free power, but we didn't want to limit ourselves in the future. We may participate in the Cal ISO system and then transport non-green power. So that's why we broke it up into two tranches. As I mentioned, this is the first green bond sale for the SFPUC. This is in a way a bit of a pilot. I think we're going to do a lot more. And this is the first bond sale ever for the Power Enterprise. There's a new credit to the market. As you can see here, our ratings were AA- from Fitch and A+ from S&P. Next slide, please. A little bit more about the transaction. Because it was the first time we've ever sold bonds for the Power Enterprise, we did it as a negotiated sale, and Wells Fargo was selected as the underwriter. They were 40% oversubscribed, and we were able to negotiate better yields. We did attract a great deal of interest from new investors, and we had one new investor overall. So, that we felt like that was a positive. We had, because of the two tranches, we were able to have one overlapping maturity. We were very curious to see if the green bond performed better than the regular tax-exempt bond. Both were sold as tax-exempt, but one had this additional designation as green bonds. And those priced exactly the same, so maybe it wasn't enough data points. I know anecdotally about other issuers that have had overlapping maturities, East Bay Mud, for example, and they did do better with the green bonds series. So I think it's bearing out that the green bonds do perform better than just regular tax-exempt bonds, which is very, very positive. Next slide, please. So just wanted to mention other types of debt that we sold for the Power Enterprise. The green bond that we sold in May was the first revenue bond, publicly offered revenue bond, but we also had allocations of new clean renewable energy bonds in the past. we're actually working on one currently. So as you can see here, for those of you who don't know, credits are another great way to finance renewable energy projects. The federal government offers a 70% subsidy on the interest, and so you can usually bring the interest costs below 2%. So we've done credits in the past for a total of 9 projects, and we have 2 more slated for issuance later this month. I'm sorry, next month. And I didn't put it here because maybe it was more of sort of a one-off thing, but we've also issued QECBs, Qualified Energy Conservation Bonds. That was in 2012. So, and those would all be those would all qualify as green bond issuances. And that's it for my presentation. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, Brian and Mike. I'm going to open it up to questions, but I want to see first if the panelists have questions, any questions for each other. We can always, if anything occurs to you later, you can also bring it up. But anything you want to ask Mike and Brian and Mike now, please let us know. Okay, so I'm going to mix in some questions from the attendees and some of my own questions. So the first question was a question I think that I also had, which is for Brian, and we can actually take this part of this question, over to Mike as well, a different version of it. So Brian, in terms of your decision to get a second opinion, you said you think you got good investor feedback about it, and I think, can you go into more detail about, first of all, how you came to get the second opinion? Was it actually before or after you spoke to investors? What the investor feedback actually was in terms of, did they have a preference as to the kind of opinion that you saw? Because there's a couple different varieties. There's the second party opinion, which is the kind I think you sought, where Sustainalytics looks at, I believe, your own green criteria, or ones that you specify. Then there's other ones which are represented by the Climate Bonds Initiative, which the Climate Bond Standard, which looks at third party pre-existing asset class standards and goes for a certification of being compliance with those standards. And then bundled in that sort of this discussion, how Sustainalytics was chosen over other potential providers like Vigeo or Cicero or other folks.
Very good. Can you still hear me, Doug?
Yeah, I hear you well, Brian. Thanks.
All right, great. So we did commit to the second opinion before talking to investors, just based on our discussions with our underwriting team, primarily the team, the sales team out of JP Morgan, that this would be helpful, and again, lined up with our commitment to try to do what we could. I guess as a newbie to the green bond market, I was struck by, at least in the transportation area, how little guidance was provided by the ICMA's qualifications for green transportation. There's really no additional detail in the principles about, well, what does that exactly mean? And if you work within the transportation industry, there's always a wide variety of projects that we undertake here. Some more sustainable than others. So for me, it was kind of obvious, at least, that we needed to go beyond just those green bond principles and provide investors with something a little more thorough and tangible. We are required as a public agency, of course, to select any party, especially for bond sales, competitively, and so we issued an RFP for a second opinion, and based on cost and qualifications, selected Sustainalytics. And then as we reached out with investors, there's a variety of folks out there at this point who are, range from very few but new mutual funds with green bond portfolios to more closely held private funds that have a sustainable mandate for their assets, to very large insurance companies, which also have some allocations set aside for green green bonds. And so I can't say we received universal consistent feedback, but I think generally it helped us that this was endorsed in the second opinion. So we didn't get any specific feedback that I heard about, well, it was this element or that element of the report that was helpful. But I think more generally, just a validation by a second party that, and again, the level of detail in the disclosure we provided was helpful, giving confidence to investors. Hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Brian. Just a couple of follow-ups on that. So you said it was I think you said it was almost a 12-week process, 6 to 12-week process. Was that particularly, I think you said you learned a lot. Do you think that that would be a shorter process on the second bond, or is that something you think is just the nature of the process?
In our case, it was, I think we probably could have carved off a little if we did Sustainalytics a second time, because obviously there was a good bit of back and forth about who we were and how accounts are structured, and on learning on our part about, well, what qualifies easily and how do we think about our projects in terms of green and not green bonds. So I think we could snip some off of that, but generally I think they were thorough, and there was again a good bit of back and forth. So I would think, again, next time I would back up still 12 weeks from sale date to make sure we had the report done on time.
And could you characterize, as you said, it was a competitive process, so I guess they came in competitively on cost, but could you characterize the level of cost versus other advisors on the deal, and whether or not the transaction cost outweighed the benefits?
Yeah, so it was under $20,000 for the second opinion, and so within the terms of our total issuance cost, that's a small fraction. So it really, candidly, wasn't the costs really weren't a factor for us in terms of hesitating. It was well worth that level of investment for us.
That's great. So, Mike, let me take it over to you about your thoughts on second opinions and your process.
We actually did not seek a second opinion for that sale. I think we probably will in the future. We didn't. We consulted with Climate Bonds in London and felt comfortable with going to market, and also our underwriter, without a second opinion because of the clear nature of the projects. It wasn't questionable at all. As a muni issuer, issuing bonds for existing large hydro seemed pretty straightforward. But I think in the future we will build that into our to our deal. So we didn't do this go around. We didn't find any investor feedback, I wasn't aware of any investor that didn't pursue it because we didn't have a third party opinion. So I didn't hear. I'm not aware of any feedback actually around that. But the deal was pretty small and also fairly straightforward, so that may have contributed to that.
And just in terms of your excluding the transmission piece, and that makes sense. But how did you conclude that? By what means did you evaluate that the transmission piece couldn't be a green bond?
It was really a sort of a policy call at our commission level because those transmission lines in the future may carry non-green power, and I think the sense was we didn't want to limit our options in the future, and so I didn't want there to be any kind of shade of question around that. So everybody felt more comfortable just carving out the two series, one where we knew 100% with 100% confidence that the funds would be used for eligible projects that will always be eligible, and then just regular tax exempt for the other projects, the transmission.
Great. There's actually some more questions about the process for the second opinion provider. So on Brian, you said that there were certain projects which were subtracted, certain projects were added. Can you talk about that process and how you and Sustainalytics came to those determinations?
Sure. So, the main issue we had was how direct or indirect should the project be to qualify as a green, within the green bond. So, construction of our light rail projects, where most of the dollars were, was a clean, uncontroversial green element. But if we're recarpeting our headquarters, okay, or re-roofing our headquarters, and there's some small capital expenditures there. Well, that's indirect. I mean, we need to make corporate expenditures in order to build light rail, but it's a level removed from the core projects. So we had enough on the direct expenditures that we ended up stripping out projects that were a little bit removed from the most green elements of our system. We did have, transit center, commuter rail. We're doing some upgrades to make our locomotives higher compliance on emissions. And so we had some projects outside of light rail that qualified, but we ended up, the discussion with Sustainalytics focused on, trimming out those projects which were maybe a step removed from the direct green projects.
And in terms of so you had the 6-page report, and how did you use that report? Was it disclosed to? The investors obviously got a copy of the report, but who else has access to the report that you guys had issued?
Yeah, it was. Thank you. It was appended as an appendix to the official statement, so it was part of the, a legal disclosure on the bonds, and so it was available in hard copy on our website, on our investor information website, and through the standard municipal disclosure vehicles out there at this point. So by making it part of the OS, the full report, that made it easy for investors to get to.
Great. And what can you describe? I think you said that a lot of many of the projects that were selected were ones that were, I think, already operating, or at least in construction phase, and most of the funds were spent, and there will be minimal ongoing reporting. Can you talk a bit about that in terms of is there any ongoing reporting? If so, what is it, and how do you think this process would differ, and would you consider it for some greenfield investments?
So we will be disclosing on our investor website the ultimate disposition of the funds and how that lined up versus the original disclosure and we have, I can't remember the period, it's at least annually, maybe more than that, until the bond funds are fully expended. So that's a step we would not normally do publicly for a bond sale. Now, of course, we have to do all that accounting for the IRS in the back end. So again, not a lot of additional work for us, since we're already having to track, as Mike or any other issuer does, at a very detailed level, down to the account code, the reimbursement of bond proceeds for projects. So really the only element of the green bond that was different was public accountability on the expenditure of the green bonds versus the original report.
Thanks. And you think that would you consider, I mean, if it were do you think the process would differ significantly if it were about assets that are to be built? I mean, one big difference is that you have to actually confirm that the proceeds are used as advertised. Do you expect that would deter you from doing this process for a greenfield project?
No, and it wouldn't. I think that'll be a little more work for us, but not a lot. Again, since we have to track all of that for bond spend down purposes anyway, and our future bond sales will be more go forward funding rather than reimbursement. So we will needing to make that kind of a more prolonged accounting for future green bonds.
Thank you. So to answer both, Mike first, the question which I think is relevant here in terms of what you think about the evolution of this market and its impact. Both of these projects the hydro improvements and many of the investments made under the Sound Transit Bond were for existing projects, and the question is, in terms of the overall impact of these green bond issuances, would they fund projects that otherwise wouldn't get funding, or is there any quote unquote additionality? And you see that even if this particular issuance did not create additional projects that wouldn't otherwise be funded, is there a pathway to that happening in the future, in your view?
That's very interesting. I mean, it's like with Krebs, for example. I mean, and getting back to that interest rate difference there, when I think if we get to a place where there's a clear interest rate advantage issuing green bonds over regular, say, tax-exempt bonds, and it's possible, I think, that projects that maybe were sort of, possible projects become actual projects because of that, because the financing terms just get so attractive. We might get to a day where we have, a green capital plan and maybe, I don't know, a brown capital plan or something, and that would be very interesting. I think that, one thing that's great about this whole green bonds initiative is that it's, generating a lot of demand for these kinds of projects, which is going to help issuers, munis address these infrastructure challenges, and then there's probably some choices that issuers make, whether it's this kind of technology or that, and if they can, if the economics are there to do the green choice, of course that really helps things. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. Brian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of exciting if that would develop. I think for ourselves, it's probably a small portion of our plan that would do that, but we've started to talk a little bit about that on the green power side. So I think that's a possibility. And I think there's two parts to this market. There's the supply part that Mike and I represent, but there's the demand part, which is, I think, really important and honestly probably needs more development, which is dedicated buyers who are willing to at least purchase at market price or better purchase at a premium. And I think there's probably ways to go on that side within the U.S. tax exempt market. Almost the vast majority of the buyers are on large institutional accounts who are very driven by yield. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if a robust buy side develops. And
in terms of, I think not having a second opinion, Mike, forgive me if you already touched on this, but so you aren't doing any special reporting for these bonds, or are you?
Yeah, so each year, so we say in our disclosure that each year we'll report out, we'll track the progress of the projects and the spending through construction, just to sort of provide I would say proof to the investor that we're actually spending the bonds on those projects. We haven't come to our annual reporting yet, but that's our commitment.
Since you are, did the Power Enterprise do any carbon reporting generally on its portfolio of assets?
I think we do. I believe so.
But excuse me, but I think if you were to do any power generation for new assets, I think what we're seeing is that the investors do want various kinds of environmental reporting. Is that something which you would consider, or that as part of your disclosure for such an issuance?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
And also, I think you said, Brian, that the ICMA transport principles were super sparse, and which is one reason why you had to go beyond. What kind of reporting requirements were you hearing from the market about transport in terms of environmental reporting, if any?
Nothing specific to the industry. Just again, green bond principles do establish some ongoing reporting requirements that we're going to meet. So that's, that was maybe a little more robust, but nothing that I'm aware of within the transit industry that's, trying to flesh out more what could and couldn't qualify for green bond issuances. There's a lot of tax exempt debt issued by public transit agencies across the country that would potentially qualify for green bonds. So, again, the supply side, I think, for green bonds, at least in my industry, is pretty huge. And I think it'll be more an issue of what does the demand side want, and what's the level of disclosure, or how much clarity are they going to want on what counts as green and what doesn't.
So both Seattle and San Francisco report their emissions under the CDP framework. That's a framework where you could actually put in the impact of these investments into that framework. Have either of you explored reporting through the city reporting framework under the CDP?
I suspect our sustainability plan group is tapped into that, but that's interesting. I'll ask.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. I have a couple more questions here. I'm just trying to read. This is longer. I'm going to read this question. I think it's interesting. Okay, in Sustainalytics' opinion, this is for Brian. For every ton of GHG emissions produced by Sound Transit, 2.2 times that amount was saved through the region from mode shift and congestion benefits. For investors, what is to help provide assurance that ridership behavior will remain as expected, and can the environmental impact change if it does?
Make sure I've got the question, which is what, if ridership goes up or goes down, that obviously is going to impact our emissions impact, and so that's clearly true. But was there more than
I think the question is there any kind of assurance for investors that in the reporting or on the bond that those ridership changes will be taken into account in figuring out what is the actual impact of the investment?
I got you. So no. I think as much as investors would rely on would be the agency's track record in terms of ridership growth. And so, we would make that available. I didn't field any of those kind of questions from folks. It all had to do strictly with the security pledge and the structure. But it's a good question. And obviously, like any element of an official statement, you're very careful of not making any assertions go forward. So, bond holders have to buy things with the state of affairs on the ground, and we very assiduously scrub the OS for any go forward projections, just because then bondholders could rely on something and later say, well, it didn't come to pass. So I guess in short, no, we provide our actuals and push the risk of that judgmentally to investors, and hope that our track record holds up in terms of ridership growth and meeting those projections.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're wrapping up now. Is there any thing either of you want to add in closing before we close?
There is. I really appreciate again the chance for NRDC to give a forum. We have an email address, greenbonds@soundtransit.com. If anybody has any ideas or additional questions, be happy to take questions through that. Again, greenbonds@soundtransit.org.
Great. Anything from you, Mike?
Just thanks, Doug and Brian. This was a great opportunity for us too, and we also welcome, of course, any comments or feedback.
Well, thanks so much for both of you. I think this is the Green Bank. I'm sorry, the Green Bonds network is really a network of peer learning, a coalition of peer learning, and so I encourage you to contact myself or any of the parties that are listed as part of the coalition for further information. We'll also be sending around an email to those of you who want to participate further in further activities over the coming year. and some questions about what your experience was today. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your day.